Hello, my dears. Last week, I was sitting in my favorite little cafe in Austin, sipping my morning latte and just watching people. It's one of my favorite things to do, watching the little stories of life unfold. At the table next to me sat a man. He must have been in his 80s, with hair the color of the first snow and posture a ballerina would envy. He was reading a newspaper, a real paper one, turning the pages with a slow, almost ritualistic rustle. When a young waitress came over to refill his coffee, he lowered the paper, looked her right in the eye, and smiled. Not just a polite, perfunctory smile, but a warm, genuine one that seemed to say, "I see you. Thank you." He asked how her day was going, listened to her brief story about upcoming exams, and said, "I'm rooting for you. You're going to do great." The girl blushed, her own smile widened, and she walked away from his table with a little more spring in her step. A few minutes later, another couple, around the same age, sat down at a table by the window. The man was dressed in an expensive suit, the woman in an elegant dress. But their faces were tense, and their voices were sharp and demanding. When the same waitress approached them, they didn't even look up at her. The man just stabbed a finger at the menu, grumbling, "This, and make it quick." The woman, meanwhile, started complaining about everything. The table was wobbly, the music was too loud, the air conditioner was blowing on her back. She didn't ask, she demanded. She didn't thank, she made snide remarks. The waitress, who had just been beaming after her conversation with the first gentleman, now looked shrunken and upset. She quickly took their order and hurried away, trying to make herself as invisible as possible. And in that moment, it hit me. There it was, the harsh, unvarnished truth that nobody likes to say out loud. It's not about age. It's not about gray hair or wrinkles. People don't stop loving old people. They stop loving those who act as if the world owes them something just for having lived to an old age. They pull away from those who carry bitterness, crassism, and constant dissatisfaction. They avoid those who have forgotten that respect is a two-way street. We who have lived to be 70, 80, or even 90 possess an incredible treasure, wisdom. But sometimes, without even noticing, we hide that wisdom behind a wall of habits that push away the very people closest to us. I'm Gloria King, and today I want to talk about what our children don't say and what our friends don't dare to mention. The 8 habits that make people, especially young people, distance themselves from us. And I promise we won't just be digging into problems. For each of these habits, I'll share a simple yet powerful way to change things. Because believe me, it's never too late to become the person people want to be around, to laugh with, and to share warmth with. If you've ever caught a distant look from a grandchild or felt that friends are calling less often, stay with me. Because what you're about to hear might bring back not just respect, but true, sincere love into your life. Let's start with the first and perhaps most common habit that poisons our relationships, the habit of being a constant critic. You know exactly what I mean. It's that quiet inner voice that, over time, starts to get louder and escapes, often without our permission. It's the voice that says, the grass was greener, the movies were more heartfelt, and young people were more respectful back in the day. My good friend Frank from Texas, a man with a heart of gold but a sharp tongue, fell victim to this habit. His grandson, a young man of about 25 with bright eyes and big dreams, recently got a job as a social media manager. He was over the moon. At the next family Thanksgiving dinner, he was enthusiastically talking about creating content, working with influencers, and analyzing metrics. His face was glowing. And what did Frank do? He listened to all of this with his arms crossed over his chest and with a heavy sigh said, "And they call that a job now? Sitting on your phone all day? Back in my day, we built bridges, worked the land, created something real. And you just post pictures." I saw the light in his grandson's eyes go out. The excitement was replaced by hurt and then by distance. For the rest of the evening, the young man barely said a word and tried to stay away from his grandfather. Frank didn't even realize what had happened. He genuinely thought he was just sharing his wise opinion, his truth about life. But in reality, he devalued what was important to his grandson. He didn't try to understand. He judged. And that's the heart of the problem. When we constantly criticize the modern world, whether it's music, fashion, technology, or career paths, we don't look wiser. We look stuck in the past, closed off to anything new. To the younger generation, this sounds like a rejection of their world, their values, themselves. They don't hear, "I'm sharing my experience." They hear, "Everything you do and love is nonsense." And who wants to spend time with someone who constantly devalues their reality? Criticism isn't wisdom. It's fear. Fear of the new, fear that our experience is becoming irrelevant. And instead of exploring this new world with curiosity, we start to attack it, defending our own world, which we feel is slipping away. So what's the solution? Stop sharing your opinion? Of course not. Your wisdom is priceless, but it needs to be presented not as a verdict, but as a story, an invitation to a dialogue. Instead of starting a sentence with, "It used to be better," or "Back in my day," try a different approach. Ask questions, show genuine interest. Instead of, "Is that a job?" Frank could have asked, "That's so interesting. I've never done anything like that. Tell me, how does it work? What's the most challenging part of your job?" Can you imagine what kind of conversation that would have been? The grandson would have felt interest, not judgment. He would have gladly shared his knowledge, and Frank might have learned something new and amazing. Stop being a judge of the new generation. Become a curious explorer. Instead of saying, "I don't get this music you listen to," say, "Play me your favorite song and explain what you like about it." Instead of criticizing their clothes, ask, "Is this in style now? Tell me about this look." When you replace criticism with curiosity, you build a bridge between generations, not a wall. And people, especially young people, are drawn to those who are willing to listen and understand, not to judge. The second habit that quietly but surely destroys our connections is the habit of not listening, but waiting for your turn to speak. This is a very insidious trap, especially for us, people with a wealth of life experience. We feel that for any situation, we already have a ready-made story, a ready-made piece of advice, a ready-made solution. And when someone, especially a young person, starts sharing their problem, we don't immerse ourselves in their story. We're mentally rummaging through the archives of our memory, looking for a similar case from our own lives. And as soon as the speaker pauses to catch their breath, we jump in with our, "Oh, that reminds me of the time back in '72. I watched this exact scene play out in my book club. One of our new members, a young woman in her 30s, was sharing her anxieties about changing careers. She spoke of her uncertainty, her fear of the unknown, the pressure from her family. She spoke softly, choosing her words carefully, her eyes full of worry. And one of our oldest members, Martha, an intelligent and well-read woman, didn't even let her finish. She interrupted her mid-sentence and launched into a half-hour monologue about how she changed jobs in her youth, how hard it was, but she persevered, and ended it all with a brisk piece of advice. "So, dear, just pull yourself together and do it." The young woman nodded politely, but I saw her shut down. She hadn't come for a lecture. She had come for empathy. She wanted to be heard, not to have her story used as a springboard for someone else's memories. And that's the problem. When we rush to share our own experience, we're essentially telling the person, "Your problem isn't unique. I've been through this, and now I'm going to tell you how you should have handled it." We shift the focus from their feelings to our own. It doesn't help. It devalues. The person feels not understood, but merely a pretext for someone else's story. This is especially hurtful to young people who are looking to us not as all-knowing mentors, but as wise and sensitive conversationalists. They want us to hear their unique pain, their unique joy, not just find an analog in our past. How can we fix this? Learn the art of active listening. It's simple, but it takes practice. When someone is speaking to you, put your stories aside. Focus on them. Look them in the eye. Nod. And most importantly, ask clarifying questions that show you are truly listening. Instead of thinking, what story can I tell in response? Ask yourself, what is he or she feeling right now? Use phrases that reflect empathy. That must have been so difficult for you. I can hear how upset you are. Tell me more about that. And only after the person has fully expressed themselves, when you see that they feel heard, only then can you gently ask, would you like me to share how I handled a similar situation? Maybe my experience could be helpful. 9 times out of 10, they will gratefully agree, because you've already given them the most important thing, your undivided attention and empathy. Respect begins with listening. When you give someone your attention, you give them a piece of your soul, and that gift is more valuable than any advice. The third habit that turns us from wise elders into grumpy old folks is constant grumbling and complaining. There's a fine line between sharing your difficulties and making complaints the main theme of every conversation. And unfortunately, as we age, many of us cross that line without even noticing. Aches, pains, bad service, noisy neighbors, ungrateful children, rising prices at Costco. The list can be endless. And at first, people sympathize. But when every meeting begins with a rundown of all the world's injustices, people start to get tired. My neighbor, let's call her Carol, had this problem. She was a kind woman, but her visits became an ordeal for me. She would come over, sit in my favorite armchair, and begin her marathon of complaints. Her back hurt so much she could barely walk over. The doctor prescribed a new medicine that gave her side effects. The grandkids didn't call again. The news was full of terrible things. After half an hour of this, I felt completely drained. Her negativity literally sucked all the energy out of me. I started avoiding her. If I saw her on the street, I'd pretend to be in a hurry. If she called, I didn't always pick up. I felt ashamed, but I just couldn't take that flood of negativity anymore. Why is this so off-putting? Because no one wants to be an emotional garbage can. People seek support, joy, and an exchange of energy in their interactions. And when you're constantly complaining, you're only taking energy, giving nothing in return. It turns a relationship into a one-way street, where one person is constantly dumping their negativity and the other is forced to absorb it. Over time, it becomes unbearable. People start to associate you not with wisdom and warmth, but with fatigue and hopelessness, and they begin to avoid you to protect their own mental well-being. So what can be done? Does this mean you can never complain about anything? You can, and you should. Sharing your struggles is normal and healthy. But the key is balance. Try the 1 complaint, 2 gratitudes rule. If you tell a friend about your aching back, immediately follow it up by mentioning how beautifully the birds were singing outside your window this morning, or how delicious your coffee was. This shows that you see the good, not just the bad. Another powerful tool is to turn a complaint into a story with humor or self-deprecation. Instead of saying, "Oh, my memory is so bad, I forget everything," tell a funny story about how you spent half an hour looking for your glasses, which were on top of your head. This will evoke a smile, not pity. And most importantly, take an active interest in the other person's life. After you've shared your problem, be sure to ask, "And how are you? What's new with you?" Show that you care about what's happening in their life. When communication becomes mutual, when there's room not only for complaints, but also for joy, humor, and gratitude, it becomes valuable. People will be drawn to you not out of a sense of duty, but because being with you, even while discussing difficulties, can feel like a source of light. The fourth habit, and this one is very tricky, is the unwillingness to adapt to the modern world, especially to technology. I know what you're thinking. Gloria, but it's all so complicated. All these smartphones, computers, the internet. I grew up in a different world, and I understand you completely. But, my dears, the world isn't going to adapt to us. We have to find a way to live in it. And when we stubbornly refuse to even try, we don't just look old-fashioned, we risk becoming completely isolated. I saw this with my Uncle Arthur. He was a wonderful man, but terribly stubborn. When the whole family switched to communicating through messaging apps, he refused to buy a smartphone. If they need something, they can call me, he'd say. As a result, he stopped receiving family photos, didn't know about spontaneous get-togethers, and never saw the video of his great-grandson's first steps. He built a wall between himself and his family. When his children tried to show him how to use a tablet to order groceries online, he'd wave them away. I've always gone to the store, and I'll keep going. Then he fell, broke his leg, and couldn't leave the house for weeks. If he had mastered that newfangled gadget, his life would have been so much easier. Why does this push young people away? Because for them, technology isn't a newfangled gadget. It's their language, their way of communicating, their reality. And when we say, I don't understand all this and I don't want to, they hear, I don't want to understand you or your world. It creates a chasm. They stop sharing the things that are important to them because it requires a smartphone. They stop inviting us to things because tickets have to be bought online. Our unwillingness to learn becomes a barrier that they are simply too lazy or too busy to overcome, and they start communicating with those who speak their language. So, what should you do? Become a computer genius at 80? No, but be willing to learn, yes. Listen, I see this thing is important to you. Spare me half an hour and show me how it works. Be my teacher. You can't imagine how this will change your relationship. Young people love to teach. It gives them a sense of importance. And it turns technology from a barrier into a bridge between you. Start small. Ask them to teach you how to send a text message, then how to make a video call, then how to look up recipes online. Don't be afraid to look silly or ask stupid questions. The process of learning is a wonderful excuse to spend time together. When you show that you're willing to adapt, you show that you're still in the game. You show that you're interested in the world your loved ones live in. And they, in turn, will treat your world and your experience with much more respect and interest. We've made it halfway, my dears. We've talked about how important it is to trade criticism for curiosity, to learn to truly listen, to find a balance between complaints and gratitude, and to be open to the new world we live in. These are all external manifestations, how we interact with others. But the next 4 habits we'll discuss touch on something deeper, our inner state. They're about how we view ourselves, our age, and our place in this world. And it is these habits that often lie at the root of the problems we've already discussed. So pour yourself another cup of tea, because now we're going to dig a little deeper. The 5th habit that pushes people away from us is the belief that our age automatically entitles us to respect. This is a very delicate point. Of course, old age deserves respect, but respect for age and respect for a person are 2 different things. And when we start acting as if everyone around us owes us something simply because we are older, it doesn't inspire respect. It inspires irritation. I remember a scene at the bank. An elderly lady was in line ahead of me. She was unhappy with how slowly, in her opinion, the young teller was working. Instead of waiting patiently, she began to complain loudly. "I'm an elderly person. I can't stand here all day. You should be serving people like me first." The young man behind the counter turned red, and people in the line started whispering disapprovingly. She was demanding respect, but she wasn't showing it to anyone, not the teller, not the other people in line. Her behavior achieved the exact opposite of what she wanted. What's the problem here? It's that true authority and respect are earned not by the years you've lived, but by your behavior, by wisdom, kindness, patience, the ability to listen. When we start using our age as a trump card, as a demand, we don't appear wise, but capricious and selfish. Young people are particularly sensitive to this. They live in a world where respect has to be earned, regardless of age, gender, or status. And when they see an elderly person acting arrogantly, they don't think, "Oh, a wise elder." They think, "Oh, just a grumpy old person." How can you change this? Stop expecting special treatment. Instead, start giving it. Be the kind of person people want to respect. Say please and thank you. Smile. Show patience, even if it feels like the world is moving too slowly. When you treat others with genuine respect, they respond in kind. Your wisdom will be revealed not in demanding attention for yourself, but in how you handle difficult situations, calmly, with dignity, with humor. Remember the waitress from my story at the beginning? The first gentleman earned her respect not because he was old, but because he was kind. He treated her like a person, and she responded with sincere warmth. Age gives us experience, but it's how we use that experience in our interactions with others determines whether we will be truly respected or merely tolerated out of politeness. The sixth habit is being a living reminder of mortality. Sounds a bit grim, doesn't it? But this is a very important psychological aspect. When young people look at us, they don't just see our experience and wisdom. They see their own future. And if all we project is pain, decline, fear, and regret, we become a frightening mirror for them. They begin to avoid us, not because they don't love us, but because they're afraid of seeing that kind of ending. Think about two types of older people you know. The first type are those who constantly talk about their ailments, about how good things were back in the day, about how they're no good for anything anymore. Every conversation with them is a dive into an atmosphere of decay. The second type are those who, despite arthritis and high blood pressure, continue to find joy in life. They talk enthusiastically about the new variety of tomatoes they grew on their balcony, the book they just read, a funny thing their grandchild did. They don't deny their age or their problems, but they don't make them the center of their universe. Which of them would you rather spend time with? My friend Eleanor from Texas, who is 82, is a perfect example of the second type. She has a host of health issues, but she never starts a conversation with them. She always asks how I am, tells a joke, shares her plans for the weekend. She is living, not just existing. And people are drawn to her because she radiates not a fear of old age, but an example of how to age with dignity and joy. She shows that life after 70 isn't the end, but simply a new, interesting chapter. And that is incredibly inspiring. Stop making your age and your ailments the main topic of conversation. Yes, it's an important part of your life, but it's not your whole life. Find something that still excites you. Gardening, reading, knitting, watching old movies, volunteering. When you talk about your passions, your eyes light up and you become an interesting person to talk to, not just a patient. Share not only your problems, but also your joys. Talk about small victories, funny observations, a beautiful sunset you saw. It shows you are still capable of seeing the beauty in this world. And most importantly, be interested in the future. Ask young people about their plans, their dreams. It shows you are still connected to life, not just looking at it from the past. When we become a symbol not of decline, but of a love for life, people stop being afraid of us. They start to admire us. They want to be around us, to soak up our energy and learn the most important thing from us, the art of living a full life at any age. The seventh habit that distances us from our loved ones is expecting the world to accommodate our slowness. As we age, we do indeed slow down. We walk more slowly, think more slowly, make decisions more slowly. That's a fact. And our loved ones, if they love us, are willing to be patient. But there's a difference between needing patience and abusing it. I saw this at the supermarket. An elderly woman was at the checkout, very slowly placing her items on the conveyor belt. That's fine. But then she started just as slowly looking for her wallet in her enormous purse. Then she started counting out her change, losing count several times. A line had formed behind her, and people were getting antsy. Instead of apologizing or trying to hurry, she started grumbling at the cashier for rushing her. At the same time, I know another elderly gentleman who, when he gets to the checkout, has his wallet and bank card out and ready. He shows that he respects other people's time, and people, seeing this, treat him with much more patience and kindness. What's the issue here? The world today moves at a very fast pace, and while we may not like it, that's the reality. And when we, without making any effort to adapt, start demanding that the whole world slow down for us, it's perceived as selfishness. We become an obstacle, a hindrance. People start to avoid us not because we're slow, but because we don't show respect for their time. How do you find a balance? First, plan ahead. If you know you need more time, leave the house earlier. Prepare everything you need, money, documents, a shopping list, before you need it. Second, be polite. A simple, "I'm sorry, I'm a bit slow," or "thank you for your patience" works wonders. It turns others' irritation into empathy. Third, don't be afraid to ask for help, but do it the right way. Instead of standing there helplessly, say, "Could you please help me find this item?" And fourth, find ways to adapt. If it's hard for you to walk through large stores, learn to order online. If you find it hard to keep up with a fast-paced conversation, meet friends in a quiet, calm setting where no one is in a rush. When we show that we are trying, that we respect the rhythm of other people's lives, they are much more willing to slow down for us when it's truly necessary. Patience is a gift we are given, and to receive it, we must show that we value it. And the last, eighth habit that can destroy even the warmest relationships is unsolicited advice. This is our curse. We've lived long lives, made tons of mistakes, learned a great many lessons, and we feel it's our sacred duty to save our children and grandchildren from every possible error. So we start dishing out advice like it's going out of style. You need to find a different job. You shouldn't be dating that guy. You're raising your children all wrong. We do it with the best intentions, but do you know what they hear? They hear, "You don't know anything about life. You're doing everything wrong. I know better." Unsolicited advice is criticism in disguise. It says that we don't trust our loved ones' decisions, that we consider them incompetent, and that is incredibly hurtful and alienating. An adult, whether they're 30 or 50, wants to make their own decisions and their own mistakes. It's their right. And when we take that right away by constantly interfering, we undermine their self-confidence and create only one desire, to get away, just to be able to breathe freely. My friend Susan from Ohio almost lost her relationship with her daughter because of this. Her daughter decided to open her own small flower shop. Susan, who had worked as an accountant her whole life, was horrified. Every day she would call her daughter and say, "It's too risky. You'll lose everything. Listen to me. I know what I'm talking about." She bombarded her with business advice, criticized her choice of suppliers, and predicted her failure. Eventually, her daughter stopped answering the phone. She said, "Mom, I love you, but I can't take this anymore. Let me make my own mistakes." Susan was deeply hurt, but she understood. She stopped giving advice and simply said, "Honey, I believe in you. If you need my help, I'm here." And their relationship mended. So what should you do? Shove your wisdom deep down and keep quiet? No. But wait until you're asked for it. That is the golden rule. If you see that a loved one is heading in a direction you think is wrong, instead of giving advice, ask a question. "I see you've made this decision. Can you tell me what led you to it?" This opens a dialogue rather than provoking a defensive reaction. Offer your help, but don't impose it. Say, "If you ever want an outside perspective, I'm always here to share my experience." And most importantly, trust them. You've raised smart, strong children. Give them the chance to use those qualities. Let them live their own lives, make their own mistakes, and learn from them, just as you once did. Your role now is not to be an instructor, but to be a safe harbor they can always come to for support, but only when it is truly needed. So there they are, my dears, the 8 habits. 8 invisible walls we sometimes build between ourselves and those we love. But the good news is that any wall can be taken down, brick by brick. And you don't need to become a different person to do it. You just need to become a little more aware, a little more empathetic, a little more open. You need to remember that wisdom is not the ability to speak, but the ability to listen. Not the ability to judge, but the ability to understand. Not the ability to demand, but the ability to give. And when we start to live this way, people don't just stop avoiding us, they start seeking us out. Because in the presence of such a person, the world becomes a warmer, kinder, and wiser place. If this video resonated with you, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and share it with a friend who might need to hear this. This was Gloria King. Take care of yourselves and cherish one another. You deserve it. See you soon.